Hi there, welcome back everybody. Last time we talked about how the short-term causes of World War I led to the start of fighting. We looked at how Austria-Hungary issued the ultimatum on July the 23rd towards Serbia. Serbia agreed to almost everything on the 25th of July 1914, but then Russia began mobilizing its army, so Austria declared war on Serbia on July the 28th. Germany then issued an ultimatum to Russia to stop mobilizing its army. On August 1st, France and Germany mobilized their armies, and Germany declared war on Russia. On August 1st, August 2nd, Germany and the Ottoman Empire signed an alliance. August 3rd, Germany declared war on France, and now we've got the alliance system kicking off and getting us into the First World War. Looking at the map, though, we can see that there's going to be some really big problems that crop up here right away at the very beginning. Problem number one, Italy. Italy does not start fighting. They don't declare war, and officially at the beginning in 1914, Italy's going to remain neutral. Now, the Ottoman Empire did sign an alliance with the Germans, and so they're eventually going to join the Central Powers, but it's going to take them a while to get their army mobilized. Problem number two, Germany's in really bad shape, and if you look at the map, you can see exactly the reason why. The German Empire is situated between Russia and France, which means Germany is going to have to be very, very careful about fighting a two-front war and dividing their forces to fight the Russians and the French at the same time. Now, the good news is, in 1905, the Germans had studied this problem, and they came up with a solution which was called the von Schlieffen Plan. The von Schlieffen Plan was essentially an idea that said Germany is going to use pretty much everything we've got to try to defeat France really quickly and to knock them out of the war. If we're able to do that, what we can do then is to take all of our resources and send them east across the German Empire to fight the Russians on the Eastern Front. What we don't want to do is we don't want to get stuck fighting in two directions at the same time and dividing our forces so that ultimately it puts such a stress and a strain on our resources that we're going to lose this war. In 1905, one of their military commanders named von Schlieffen came up with a plan to do this, and today we refer to this as the von Schlieffen Plan. So if you look at this particular map, I'm going to show you the actual battle plan map here in just a minute, but I want you to focus on the area between the German Empire, France, Belgium, and that little teeny tiny country right there in between the three of them, which is called Luxembourg. Now, the next map we're looking at here is actually of that particular region. So we can see on the right-hand side, we've got Germany. On the lower left-hand side, we've got France. You can see places like Paris that hopefully you should recognize. Belgium up there on the top. And then Luxembourg is the LUX in the middle of all of them. The German army was divided into 7 pieces, and on August 4th, right, so just a couple days after declaring war, and actually the beginning of the war itself, the German army divided into 7 pieces. 3 of them invaded France directly across the border, but their goal was not to actually invade France. Their goal was to make them believe that the German army was coming directly across the border. While that 5th, 6th, and 7th division invaded France, they pretty much started fighting, and when the French started to fight back, they turned back around and ran back towards Germany, hoping the French would follow them, which they did. While that was going on, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th divisions invaded Luxembourg and Belgium, which both were neutral countries at the time, to try to cut around the French army, capture the city of Paris, force the government to surrender, and then surround the entire French army, which was going to be sitting on the border between between Germany and France, and then end this war quickly on the side of France, right? They're going to try to end that war quickly so that they can get all of their soldiers out to the Eastern Front to fight against the Russians. Now, a couple of things went wrong with this. Problem number one is they didn't have a whole lot of plans for what happens if our army doesn't move quite as fast as we need it to. Problem number two is when they invaded neutral Belgium, if you remember from last time, Belgium has a secret alliance with the British. The British have promised to keep Belgium independent, and so now invading Belgium insults the British pride, and so England is now being drawn into this war as well because they are obligated to defend Belgium. When the war first starts, the four divisions in the northern part of the German army do advance into Belgium, and they get all the way up to, you can see on the map, there's an area called the Aisne, A-I-S-N-E, and the Marne, M-A-R-N-E. The Marne River actually flows right into the middle of Paris itself. So if you find Paris and you move a little bit to the east, directly east, you'll see the Marne River. Now the Marne River is a big deal. And the reason the Marne River is a big deal is the Germans were invading, they were having lots and lots of success, things were going really well until at the banks of the Marne River, the French army decided that they had a different tactic. And what they started to do was they started to dig trenches and get down into those trenches to protect themselves. When they got into the trenches, the German soldiers who were standing up in the field were easy targets, and so to respond, the Germans started digging trenches of their own. And basically the Germans couldn't invade and the French couldn't go anywhere, and so they sat in their trenches and they waited for a while, and they started digging their trenches out to the sides in both directions. Now the race then was to see who could get around the other one to try to flank the other army and ultimately cause their defenses to collapse and then hopefully continue to advance and win the war. And so from that Marne River, right there where you can see the word Marne, M-A-R-N-E, both sides started to dig their trenches closer and closer towards the sea. So they were moving up and left. They were moving northwest toward the Strait of Dover. And we call this particular event the Race to the Sea, until eventually the trenches got all the way up to the ocean and they couldn't dig any further, so then they dug them back the other direction, getting closer and closer to France, or to Switzerland rather. On the big map, what that means is all the way from the English Channel to the border with Switzerland, there are going to be trench lines in this First World War on the Western Front. So what does a trench line look like? Well, this is about half of it. This would be on just one side. On the right-hand side of this picture, what you can see is what is called no man's land. No man's land is the area between the trenches. After no man's land, the first thing you're going to run into is barbed wire barricades. This is to prevent people from just walking across no man's land and jumping into a trench. The barbed wire was often very thick. It was very sharp. It slowed people down. It also tried to funnel people together into particular areas of the front line where they had machine gun emplacements so that they could protect themselves. Beyond that barbed wire, as we're moving further and further left into this particular picture, you can see the trenches themselves, which were dug, of course, not in directly straight lines, so you couldn't just shoot straight down a trench line and kill a whole bunch of soldiers. They were dug in kind of zigzags. Also, of course, you can see the kind of communications trenches, which connect back further into another line of trenches. And what you've got here is a multiple layer defense strategy. And this would have gone on for miles. And of course, it would have been exactly the same thing on the other side. So if we move to the next one, what you can see is this is a little bit better aerial view of what trench warfare looks like. You've got trenches on either side, you've got no man's land in between, you've got barbed wire separating those two, and basically both sides are going to sit in these trenches for pretty much the remainder of the war and either wait for the enemy to attack them, or they're going to get ready to attack the enemy, and it's going to be back and forth, and what we call that is going over the top. Now, the really big problem with this is these trenches were not very nice places to be. In the springtime, they got super muddy and wet, and people had a really, really hard time, living outside in the winter and the summer, and you had to sit in the trench, and you had to be really careful not to stick your head up because there were snipers on both sides that would try to kill you. When the officers blew the whistle and it came time to go over the top, you and your buddies had to grab all of your weapons and you had to all go up over the top in a big mass formation. And the problem is that made you very, very vulnerable to machine gun fire and to counterattack from the other side. They tried to soften each other up with artillery strikes that would last, all day, all night for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And right in the middle, of course, what you've got is no man's land. No Man's Land was just a desolate, barren wasteland that was just completely and totally destroyed and obliterated by the First World War. A technological advance that made this even worse, of course, was the machine gun. This is a two-man crude machine gun that ultimately could fire at an incredibly high rate of speed, and basically it allowed a couple of soldiers really to kill a lot of the attacking enemy, and it really turned the Western Front into a bloodbath and into a meat grinder. And this is going to be pretty much the way that the Western Front is going to work for the entire duration of the war. So from 1914 all the way up until 1919, this is what's going to happen. People are going to stay in their trench, they're going to go over the top, they're going to get killed, they're going to go back, and this kind of back and forth, back and forth. The problem is that's a huge amount of sacrifice, and it never really produces any really important material gains. It doesn't really move the front lines. It's asking people to do really, live with really horrible conditions and do really horrible things and live with really bad situations without really gaining anything. And so the problem is that really doesn't play into the idea of militarism that a lot of people thought was going to be the case in World War I. The other thing, of course, is people had the idea that the war was going to be over by Christmas of 1914, and the longer this war stretched on, the more people were frustrated by the fact that they didn't really know what was happening or what they were fighting for, and the whole thing essentially became, a really big problem that a lot of people were not very motivated to work hard on because they thought it was kind of pointless. So this is the beginning of the actual fighting part of World War I. We're going to leave it off there. I'll be back later with another video to explain a couple of more things about World War I and how it worked. So I hope these videos are working out well for you. I hope you're getting some good notes out of it. I hope you're getting a better understanding than just from what you can get from the reading. And I will speak back to you guys later.